Trees can be big like these black cherries and apples, or small like these white spruces with a long way to grow. Trees can have rough bark like this black cherry. Some people say that this bark looks like burnt potato chips. Trees can have smooth bark like this gray birch. Can you see all of those holes made by a yellow-bellied sapsucker? Trees make buds and flowers and leaves. Look at these buds on a young beech tree. Trees make all types of seeds and seed holders. This is a pine cone from a white spruce. It's all closed up. And trees are homes for birds and other animals. This is a mourning dove nest in a Norway spruce in our front yard. Our vernal pool sit spot is at the edge of the forest, surrounded by different trees. Let's visit. Oh, look, someone else has been here. A deer. Can you see its hoof print? Hello, old friend.
It is Tree Week, and we have learned so much from the naturalists at Sheldrake this week. I am sitting right beside our vernal pool sit spot. There's a tree right in front of me, and its roots come down, down, down into the vernal pool, and they are covered in moss. This tree is part of our vernal pool system, and the tree itself is a system, taking water up through its roots that go through the ground, bringing it up, 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 up to the branches, out to the leaves, producing flowers, sometimes seeds, sometimes cones, giving us oxygen through those leaves, creating shelter and homes for all kinds of animals. We've talked about many things over the past few weeks, and I'm thinking a lot, and I imagine you are thinking a lot about how all these parts of the forest and of our world work together. I wrote a poem a long time ago in which I said, when the fall leaves fall down, they remind me of love letters. And I kind of want to write love letters back to all the trees. Trees do a lot for us, and we can do for the trees too, just by being out here, getting to know them, paying attention to them, learning what it is the trees give to us, and learning how we can take care of them too. So this week, we continue our conversation about trees, but trees, of course, are not on their own. Trees aren't alone. Trees work together with everything in the forest, with everything in our neighborhood. Trees work together with us, with plants, with animals, little and big, birds of the sky. Trees, no matter where you live, no matter where I live, and no matter where we'll live in the future, we will have trees.
But before we talk more about trees, let's look for tadpoles.
Here you can see a little tadpole, and I am going to see if I can make him move for you. There he goes. Oh, bye-bye.
And now, back to Tree Talk in a new spot.
Hello, 4th and 5th grade wild riders of Mamaroneck. I'm sitting on the forest floor here. You can see the creek down below, and when I reach down and grab a handful, I end up with all kinds of things. I have a tiny bit of moss here. I have all kinds of beech leaves. If you remember them from a couple weeks ago, they were clinging to the trees, and we just saw them a couple minutes ago too. And twigs. I have all kinds of stuff here. There are large pieces of decomposing wood that just falls apart in my hand. If I were to walk a little further down there, I'd find cones and needles that had fallen over last fall and have been underneath snow all winter long. And today, sitting here amongst all these trees, I am thinking about how interesting it is to learn about them. There are so many things to know about trees, and just like anything else in the world, the more I learn, the more I realize I have to learn if I want to really understand the subject. So one thing to realize about trees is there are deciduous trees, and those are the ones we think of with flat leaves like this, maple leaves or oak leaves or beech leaves like this. And then there are coniferous trees, and those are the trees with needles. We can call them evergreen trees. They make cones, and their seeds are inside the cones. And when we look at trees, that's one thing we notice right away, right? We notice whether it's deciduous or coniferous. We notice the bark. Is it smooth? Is it rough? As we looked at on the field trip. We might notice about the flowers or about the seeds. One thing I saw here as I was poking around was the Beech Seed Pod, and this is that little spiky ball that opens up and the seed comes out. Many seeds have containers that hold them, and then the seed comes out. So today, before we talk about writing, I would like to share with you something about drawing, a kind of drawing we haven't talked about before. And I will give you a link to a Guide to Sketching Trees by Claire Walker Leslie in a little bit. But right now, I want to explain to you what's in here, and then I'll show you something called blind contour drawing. So this is a little guide that gives many short exercises about drawing trees and tips for drawing trees. So you can print this later if you want to and take a look at it and try some of Claire Walker Leslie's exercises. But blind contour drawing, which she talks about here, is a way of drawing in which the artist does not look at the paper. Instead, what you do, or what I do, is we look at the object we wish to draw and then let our eyes trace it on the paper the whole time, keeping our eyes on the object and not on the paper. So that's what blind contour drawing is. And this week, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to adopt a tree, maybe more than one, do a blind contour drawing, or if you don't want to do that, just really study the tree and draw it. And then we'll talk about some tree writing. But here, back to blind contour drawing. Here's one I did. This is of a tree in my yard, and I drew this. It took me a couple minutes probably, and I didn't look at the paper the whole time. So this is absolutely not a perfect scientific drawing, but what it did is it helped me to understand the shape of the tree because my eyes were so focused on looking at the shape of the tree. It was a very interesting exercise. I think that this is a Douglas fir, but I'll verify that when I get back into the house. I also drew one of its cones. The cone was about this long. Actually, I think I'll write that. It was about 3.5 inches long, maybe. And it was all closed up because cones are sometimes closed and sometimes open for the seeds to come out. That's how they reproduce. And I did draw a little tiny seed. I broke open the cone so that I could see the little tiny seeds inside. So I have that. But let me show you now. I'm going to do a contour drawing, just a brief one. And the longer you take, like you could set a timer and say, I'm going to do a contour drawing for 3 minutes and make my eyes follow these patterns for 3 minutes or longer. And the more time you spend, the more details you'll have. No, this is not supposed to be like a perfectly accurate drawing. It's a way to understand what we're seeing. It's a way to take in the shapes, and sometimes when we're not being so critical about what we're writing and drawing, we're able to open up and express ourselves in ways that surprise us. So while I would not say this was an incredible, piece of art, I really like it. Like I might like it more than what I would have done if I had studied the tree and with my eyes on the page. I did study the tree with my eyes on the tree. So I'm going to turn this way here now so you can see my paper, and I'm going to take just a handful of seconds to look at it might be hard for you to tell which one, but there are lots of trees close together. There are a couple coniferous trees there, and they're right near each other, and I'm going to look at the one on the left when I draw. So you'll see my drawing more than you'll see the tree. My eyes are, and I'm not lifting my pencil. I did once, but I'm not going to anymore. I'm not looking at the paper. The sun is in my eyes, but that's okay. It feels good. There it is. Now I could go in there now add some needles. I could do that when I get into the house. I could add some needles with green. Maybe I will do that. We'll see. But this coniferous tree, in doing this, what it helped me to do is to see how some of those trees, they go up. They're sort of going up into the air, and they're also alternating. So I thought it was kind of interesting to notice how the trees are not all, the branches, the way that they come out, how some are close together and then they're on opposite sides. And the leaves on this tree, or the needles on this tree, are like a flat needle. And I'll do a close-up here later of that so that I can remember which tree this was. And I will put the date. So it is May 5th, 2020. It is about 4:45 p.m. and it is cool and breezy. And I'm just writing out in the forest at home. There we go. So I'll add more to this later. And I may even sketch some of the things I've been finding on the ground that I told you about. So this week, we think about contour drawings. We think about learning new trees and leaves. I adopted this tree in my mind, this Douglas fir that I drew, and I'm really thinking about it and its parts, and I'm thinking about new trees that I can learn, and I can learn them through their bark, through their, not their dog bark, but their skin bark, through their leaves, through their flowers, through seeds. And now I won't be seeing all of these things now, but I will be able to see some of them as the weeks go on. So I am going to keep track here, just as I did with birds. You might remember wanting to learn new birds. I am now thinking I would like to learn some new trees so I can tell the differences between some of the trees that are near me. So for writing this week, instead of writing about what I'm seeing, instead of writing about what I'm observing right at this moment, instead we are thinking tree memories. Ann Ward, who works in your district office, as does Lori Pastor, we met with the environmentalists of Sheldrake in a Zoom meeting to talk about making these videos. And when we did so, we introduced each other to each other by sharing a favorite tree memory or story. And so I wrote in my notebook today about a favorite tree memory of mine, about a favorite tree that gives me a memory. I jotted a few first, and then I wrote one particular memory I have with a tree. Actually, two trees. I'll share it with you. Memories of trees. I had making maple syrup, cidering, Henry, my son, reading in a tree, the weeping willow at my house when I was a little girl, and two trees holding the hammock on Mount Vernon Road. That's what I picked. And I'll read you my memory. I will never forget the two silver maples in the backyard of our first house. They were big and mighty in a small fenced-in yard, and they were spaced perfectly apart to hold a hammock, a blue net hammock that swung our children, the neighborhood children, and the children from my writing class, and a lot of grown-ups too. Mark had tied ropes around the trunks of these two maples, and each end connected to the hammock. The trees looked down as we cuddled new babies, gave gentle and wilder rides, holding the top of the hammock pinched closed. And maybe they read our books over our shoulders, the silver maples. I have one very poignant memory of these two trees, something they saw that I did not. One day, there was a knock at our front door. I opened it, and two neighbor girls, about 9 and 10, held plastic bags and looked up at me. "May we go play in your hammock?" they asked. When I said yes, they looked down and then up again and smiled. "We want to swing our dolls in the hammock, but we don't want anyone to see." They each held their plastic bags tightly and smiled, and I smiled and waved them back. I did not go back to watch, but Abby and Kristen and their two happy dolls were swinging in the hammock. But now, over 20 years later, I can still see this beautiful image in my mind of two old silver maples keeping watch over yet another chapter in someone's life, watching two girls hold on to their good, fun play. Trees see a lot over the years that they live. They are systems for giving shelter and food, for giving oxygen and taking water, for housing creatures, and too, for giving beauty and a safe place for people, big people and small people. I do not know if those two trees still stand, but I can still see them. And if I could whisper secrets into their trunks, I'd say, thank you for that day. I saved myself some space here because in the same way I loved hearing other people's tree memories once in that Zoom meeting, I now want to collect some other tree memories. So I am asking my mom and my dad and my sister and everybody who lives in my house to share a favorite tree memory with me, and I will either write it in here, or if they send it to me, I'll cut it out and paste it in and decorate around it so that I can, in my pages of trees, I can keep those memories and cherish them. So I encourage you this week, try a blind contour drawing without looking, or with looking sometimes. That's a modified contour drawing. You may use this if you wish. I encourage you to adopt a tree, get to know its parts, maybe sketch them. If you wish to get to know more trees, make a page in your nature journal for this. And gather some memories you might list and write one tree memory long. I know you've written personal narratives before, and in this, it's a personal narrative about a tree, right? Including what people said, what people thought, what it looked like, right? What happened, what were the actions, just like a personal narrative about anything, but this time with a tree at the heart. So it's good to see you. I look forward to digging back into my pages, and I will see you next time.
Trees and people live together. The power company cut several branches of these Norway spruces so that the lines could go through, but they're still so beautiful. This is a new sugar shack right next to our property. You can see the tip of our barn way behind it. Our neighbors are tapping the sugar maple trees to make syrup. And they gave some of their delicious maple syrup to us. Here you can see some on a Belgian waffle. Sometimes people grow trees inside. This is a calamondin tree I once had in our living room. These maple trees are in full bud and flower for spring. Look at those little green leaves against the blue sky. When I walk up the hill in these early days of spring, it looks like the trees are all whispering to each other in green. Take a look at this dead elm tree. You can see the shelf fungus at its base. Shelf fungus is a decomposer, and that means this tree is on its way to becoming soil again. We can learn more about trees by spending time outside, by writing about trees, drawing trees, reading about trees, and collecting tree treasures. I wish you a joyful week of tree. Learn more about blind contour drawing and modified contour drawing from this handout by Claire Walker Leslie. In a blind contour drawing, don't lift your pen or pencil from the page. Younger students can talk about this way of drawing with an older sibling or adult. Write wild, Mamaroneck friends. Hug a tree.